Before coming to Brazil, there was one topic that came up more than anything else. Not the food, not the language, not even the cultural shock. It was always the same question repeated by friends, family, strangers on internet, and even the Brazilians themselves. Isn't it dangerous? And I want to be very clear from the beginning. This video is not about denying reality. Brazil has problems. Every Brazilian knows that better than any foreigner. This video is about something else, the difference between the fear created by stories and the reality you actually experience when you live, walk, talk, eat, and exist in a place. I arrived in Brazil prepared to be alert. I wasn't reckless, I wasn't naive, and I wasn't pretending everything would be perfect. But what surprised me almost immediately was that fear didn't dominate my days. Curiosity did. My first city in Brazil was Aracaju, Sergipe. And if you're watching this and you're Brazilian, you already know how unusual that is. Aracaju is not a place foreigners land by accident. It's not on influencer list. It's not a backpacker hub. It's not Brazil for beginners. And that's exactly what it became, one of the most important places in my entire journey. From day one, I was visibly different. I was the only blonde guy around, the only obvious foreigner, the only one struggling to order food, to understand jokes, or to follow conversations happening at full speed. And still, something felt surprisingly calm. People look at me, yes, but they didn't look at me like a target. They looked at me like a question. Curiosity was the dominant emotion, not suspicion. Taxi drivers asked me why I was here. People at bars wanted to know where I was from. Neighbors greeted me even though we didn't share a language yet. And that alone already went against everything I had been warned about. One of the most talked about moments whenever I tell this story is something that happened very early on. I was with my friend and her cousin came to meet us at the gate of the building. Completely normal situation. Hugs, smiles, casual conversation. And then I noticed something that for a European like me instantly felt shocking. She had a gun behind her belt. She was a police officer. Now I won't pretend my brain didn't freeze for a second. Where I'm from, this is not normal. It's not visible, it's not casual. But what hit me even harder than the gun itself was the atmosphere around it. Nobody reacted, nobody panicked, nobody felt threatened. It was simply part of reality. And here's the part that might sound strange to people outside of Brazil. Instead of feeling unsafe, I felt protected. Not because of the weapon itself, but because of what it represented. Structure, presence, awareness. Not because of the weapon itself, but because of what it represented. Structure, present, awareness. It was my first lesson that safety is deeply contextual. What scares you in one culture might actually mean stability in another. As days passed, I started noticing patterns. Locals knew where to go and where not to go. They knew the time of the day that mattered. They understood which streets felt fine at night and which didn't, and they shared that knowledge openly, not with fear but with care. That's something I think many foreigners misunderstand. Brazilians don't warn you because they live in constant terror. They warn you because they care. There's a huge difference. Going out at night in Aracaju felt normal. People sitting outside, families walking, bars open, music playing. I wasn't wandering randomly into places I didn't understand. I followed the rhythm of the city. And that's an important lesson. Safety in Brazil is not about hiding, it's about listening. Being visibly foreign didn't turn into danger. It turned into conversations, sometimes awkward ones, sometimes funny ones, sometimes repetitive ones. But almost always human. People wanted to know my story. Why Aracaju? Why Brazil? Why not Rio? And yes, later I did go to Rio de Janeiro, the city everyone loves to use as an ultimate example of danger. And I'll be honest, Rio is intense. It's bigger, faster, louder, more complex. But again, intensity doesn't automatically mean unsafe. I stayed mostly in tourist areas. I paid attention. I didn't act stupid. I didn't try to prove anything. And I felt safe. Not invincible, not careless, but safe enough to enjoy the city, to feel the energy, to understand why people fall in love with it despite everything they hear. There is also something important to say about tourists versus locals. Tourists often come with two extremes, either complete fear or complete ignorance. Locals live in the middle. They adapt, they know, they move intelligently. When you learn from locals instead of headlines, your entire experience changes. Brazil is not one country in practice, it's many realities coexisting. The experience in Sergipe is not the same as Rio. Rio is not Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is not the South. Talking about Brazil as one single experience is already a mistake. And here's the controversial part. There are places outside of Brazil where I felt more unsafe emotionally. Places where people were colder, where suspicion was silent, where fear was hidden but constant. Safety is not only about crime statistics, it's also about how people treat each other. In Brazil, I felt in a good way, observed, included, corrected when needed, warned without being judged. That creates a sense of belonging, and belonging is a form of safety people rarely talk about. Would I recommend everyone to come to Brazil without thinking? No. Would I say Brazil is perfect? Of course not. But would I consider living there? Absolutely. Not because it's easy, but because it feels alive. Because conversations matter. Because people matter. Brazil taught me that the safety is not the absence of risk. It's the presence of awareness, community, and humanity. And that lesson stayed with me far beyond my trip. So when people ask me now, wasn't Brazil dangerous? I usually smile and say, it was different. And different doesn't mean worse. Sometimes it means more real. And if you're Brazilian watching this, I know you'll have your opinions, disagreements, stories that go the other way. And that's exactly why this conversation matters. Reality is complex. One experience doesn't cancel another. Let's talk about it.